What's up, everyone? This is the Socio guy here, and we're back with O-level sociology, and we're back with doing research methods today. If you want a revision of all the topics that we've done so far, click the link above my head. This is for if you're watching on YouTube, and there'll also be a link in the description box below. So my buddy will sort that out wherever the link goes. I hope it doesn't put in a really inconvenient place. So the topic that we are going to be covering today is longitudinal studies. Now, this is a really short and sweet topic, and it kind of combines elements of observation studies. So if you want a little refresh on observation studies, you can check my previous video on that. So why don't we just dive straight into what longitudinal studies are. So as I've written on the board, and I hope you can see all of this clearly, a longitudinal study is a sociological study that is done over a very long period of time. And by a very long period of time, I mean somewhere in the ballpark of 5 to 50 years. There have been a number of studies. There have been done by the British government. There's a study known as the 7-Up study that looked at 49 participants over the course of 60 years and basically checked how their opinions changed, how their beliefs changed, how they grew up, under what circumstances they grew up. So it mapped out a lot of this qualitative ethnographic data about people's lives, what influences the decisions they make. And the great part about these studies is that since they take place over such a long period of time, you can kind of do a comparison. You'll get information from when the participants were very young to when they grow older in age, and you can see how people themselves have transformed, what the environmental factors were. And this is also great because it gives you data that's highly valid in nature. And I'm sure all of you at this point are very familiar with the term validity, and if you're not, it simply has to do with notions of truth. And why is this research method high in validity? Because as I said, you're going to use techniques such as observation studies, interviews with these people. You'll use open-ended questionnaires to get some information from them. And more importantly, you want to know the whys and the hows, not simply just the whats. This is not interested in getting that quantitative statistical information. It wants to see these long-term changes and these long-term trends, right? And researchers do this, they'll do this study over a period of regular intervals. So let's say you started the study somewhere in the 70s, you chose about 100 participants. You made your sample, you interviewed them, you observed them for 1 year, and then you go dark. Then you just back off, you study the information that you've gotten, you study the data that you have, and then again, let's say after a period of 2-3 years, a significant amount of time for changes to have happened in people's behavior, you go back and you interview them. You kind of get to see the real picture, you get to see the progress of people, and it really gives you an in-depth look at society. Now, these kind of studies are not really used by individual researchers because obviously it would make sense, or it wouldn't make sense, for one single person to carry out a study over a period of 50 years. A, he would get really bored, and B, it would be really creepy if you had like one guy just progressively getting older, stalking you for like a 50-year period. These studies then are mostly done by governments or research institutes who want to gather data for a census maybe, or for a study that can be used throughout the years in making social policy, things such as this. Things to give you like a historical analysis on the evolution of social systems. Now, just like any study, this has its advantages, this has its strengths. On the board, you can see that of course, it helps you map out trends, it gives you in-depth qualitative information, and it can help you do comparisons with previous studies. And more importantly, if you gather this long-term information from one part of the world, you can compare and contrast it to long-term information from a different part of the world. And you can get this holistic picture of how human social systems have evolved, keep evolving, and then you can kind of map out future changes. It can help you forecast the kind of trends or changes that will happen in the future as well. But with every study and with all advantages, there is a downside to this. And the downside primarily for this is that this should be common sense. It is time consuming and expensive Time consuming, obviously, because as the name suggests, it is a longitudinal study. It takes place over a very long period of time. So duh, it's time consuming. And as we all know, time is money, so obviously a lot of funds will go into this. Because there's lots of logistical things involved in this, keeping track of participants, finding skilled researchers to carry out the various research methods that will be used in carrying out a longitudinal study. And moving on from time consuming and being expensive, it can lead to what is a very interesting phenomenon in sociological study, which is known as the Hawthorne effect. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the Hawthorne effect, might have experienced this at some point in their life. The Hawthorne effect is basically when you are being observed by someone, you develop what is known as performance anxiety. You kind of falter, you kind of stutter, you kind of forget how to play your part, or simply your behavior begins to change. And this is very true. I mean, those of you who are students and who are currently enrolled in schools, obviously students are currently enrolled in schools, you might have noticed that in a classroom, whenever a teacher gets observed by their manager, all of a sudden they're on their toes, they're a bit too efficient, they're trying to keep that energy level high and not be all lazy in class. I know you all have experienced this, and that is known as the Hawthorne effect. And this happens in pretty much everyone's life. Another issue that we have with longitudinal studies are that what is known as sample attrition occurs. Sample attrition is just a fancy sociological term for saying that because these studies take place over a long period of time, the original sample size begins to decay. This decay can be because of any number of reasons. Obviously, if a study is taking place over a period of 50 years, people might die, they get old. People might leave the country, they might not be willing to participate in the study anymore. I mean, think about it. If every couple of years you get a random guy coming to your door and being like, yo, let me interview you, let me help you answer this questionnaire, or let me observe you in your daily life, it will get kind of weird and annoying, so you might just opt out of the study. Or simply, you cannot trace the participants anymore. So sample attrition and Hawthorne effect are two particularly, dangerous disadvantages that can take place in longitudinal studies, and it's something that the researchers have to try to control, and they have to kind of make sure that this, especially the Hawthorne effect, does not get in the way of the validity of the study. I'm just going to quickly step off screen so you can take a quick look of this and maybe take a screenshot if you want. All right, I hope you took a screenshot of that. So that pretty much covers our topic for longitudinal studies. I hope you found that useful. We're going to keep continuing with research methods until we're done. We just have a few more things to do. Next in my series will be a topic on content analysis and triangulation, two particularly interesting methods. And before this, I'm sure you checked my topic on sampling. So once we're done with research methods, we will move on to family, which is the start of actual sociology. Research methods is a very dry, boring, ratta kind of topic, so it can get very, monotonous. But family is something that's very interesting, something we can all relate to, and I hope to start with that very soon. So I hope you found this useful, and cheers, take care.